Teacher and leader to give the award to, and that is Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. Sheikh Hamza faces an issue in the Muslim community that we in the Jewish community face, and that the Christian community faces. It's the issue of a kind of pull between a vision of the world based on fear and a vision of the world based on love. And whether you articulate that in terms of a certain version of orthodoxy, not all orthodoxy in the Jewish world, but certain version of orthodoxy or versus a certain version of renewal, or whether you articulate that in terms of the split between fundamentalists and say liberal Christians, or whether you articulate that in terms of the pull of a certain kind of Islamic fundamentalism versus a kind of openness to the modern world. This struggle is going on in all the different religious communities, and in fact, really in the hearts of people all over the planet. Hamza has played the role of creating in this country, and actually now I had the honor of traveling to Canada to see him speak to a grouping of Muslims, 10,000 Muslims who had come together to hear him and respond to his work. I was the only Jew in this context. No, that's not true. My wife was there. But Hamza has played the role of creating a voice for an Islam that is both authentic to the texts, authentic to the tradition, and nevertheless open to the wisdom of that has emerged through the West and has emerged through some of the traditions of enlightenment without capitulating to what is distorted in Western culture, and without slavishly trying to assimilate to a Western culture in the way that we know that in the Jewish world and in the Christian world those tendencies or those attractions led sometimes to a slavish assimilation in order to fit in. So I'd like to ask Sheikh Hamza to come up, and I'll read to you the award that we've written for you. Delighted that you could make it. Tikkun magazine and the network of spiritual progressives is proud to give this award to Sheikh Hamza Yusuf in recognition of your contribution to Tikkun Olam. This Tikkun award is presented in recognition of your role as a teacher and interpreter of Quran in a way that is deeply rooted in tradition, and yet reflects also a grappling with what is best in Western thought and culture. You have guided the creation of Zaytuna College and are chair of its board of trustees. And through that school, you seek an understanding of Islamic law that is sophisticated and responsive to the highest ethical values of the human race. You have been at the forefront of creating an Islam that rejects triumphalist interpretations and combines a traditionalist and mystical approach with an attentiveness to the religious and pastoral needs of the rapidly expanding Muslim community in the West. In this way, you have supported the integration of Muslims into America without abandoning the deep truths and insights of Islam. Bestowed this 14th day of March 2011, 9th day of Adar 2, 5771. Thank you.
Bismillah. Thank you very much. I'd like to start off with a little bit of Quran, if people will indulge me here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم. Bismillah. Those verses are from a chapter called The Merciful, which was a name that the Arabs didn't have for God. It was actually introduced by the Quran. And it says that the Merciful who taught this recital, created the human being, and gave you language. And the sun and the moon were placed in a perfect reckoning. And the stars and the trees that adorn the world are in prostration to the divine. And then it says, and God set up this perfect balance and told you don't transgress the balance and establish the balance with justice. And the entire earth was placed for all living creatures. And then it says, which of the favors of your Lord are you in denial of? What are you denying of the favors of your Lord? One of the most important in the Islamic tradition, and I feel I can speak somewhat for the Christian tradition because I came out of an Orthodox Christian tradition and also went to Jesuit school. So my mother was raised in the Orthodox tradition. My father was raised in the Catholic. My last name is Hansen, which comes from the Irish Catholics who came to this country were actually third-class citizens when they got here in the 1830s and 40s. And a lot of Irish would change their names to sound more Anglo-Saxon. And so O'Hansech became Hansen. And my Irish Catholic family actually began denying their roots once they got rid of the brogue and rose up into Philadelphia society. But one of the most important things in the Islamic and Christian tradition is the sin of pride is a real problem, spiritual pride. One of the interesting things about religion is you can take religious jokes, and I do this all the time. I hear jokes about Christians or Jews, and I just change the names, and they become Muslims, and they work perfectly. So, I heard this with a different religion, but the imam is in the prayer niche, and he has an epiphany and falls and begins to say, I'm nothing, before this Almighty God. And the mu'adhin comes in, the caller of prayer, and sees the imam saying, I'm nothing, and says, God, if he's nothing, what am I? He falls down, I'm nothing. And then the guy that sweeps the mosque comes in and sees the great imam and the prayer caller and says, my God, if they're nothing, what am I? He falls down, I'm nothing. And the imam says to the mu'adhin, look who thinks he's nothing. Right? So, spiritual pride is a real problem in our traditions. One of the things that I think all of our religions have a problem with today is that I think religions have always been pathogenic in that they can produce so much trouble in the souls of people. And even though they're supposedly to actually heal our souls, and a lot of people do very well, usually who are already well. they do well by religion. It helps. George Bernard Shaw said that religion, the problem with religion is it only benefits religious people. So, but the problem is that when irreligious people begin to dress in the cloak of religion, all these problems start. And we've got a planet filled with real nutcases in our religions that are causing a lot of problems for those of us who actually get a lot out of religion and enjoy religion, and hopefully it keeps us in some kind of a balance. But we have a real problem, and to deny that problem, I think, is to deny what I call the negative externalities of religion. This is an economic term. You have externalities. A corporation sets up a factory. They begin to pollute the river, and it goes downstream, and then you get babies with problems down the road. The negative externalities of religion are those toxic side effects of religion that we don't really like to deal with, just like the corporations don't like to deal with the negative externalities that they produce because they want to say, no, our primary product is building tires or lighting your houses with nuclear energy. Oh, sorry that we had a meltdown and you're all really sick now. We didn't intend it. Right? Collateral damage. The difference between us and them is we don't intend to harm anybody, even though we end up harming people. And so I think one of the things that we as religious and committed religious people do is we tend to deny the negative externalities of our traditions. That has nothing to do with me. That's not my religion. But those people within these religious families that are using our traditions, they're using the books that we use. They're using the words that we read. And they are deriving very different understandings, but often understandable because of the nature of a lot of the pre-modern language that exists in these texts. And within the Orthodox tradition, you had a profound weight of understanding that had to be carried before you were allowed to interpret these texts. All you have to read is St. Augustine on Christian doctrine. It's a very powerful argument for a serious training in grammar before you try to interpret the Bible. Right? Because if you don't know what a conditional sentence is, you can get in a lot of trouble reading the Bible. If you don't know that there are clauses that restrict meanings, if you don't know that there are general terms that are sometimes meant to be specific. I'll give you an example. In Arabic rhetoric, there is something that is, it's like a synecdoche. You use the whole of something to, or a metonymy rather. You use the whole of something to indicate a part. So for instance, there's a verse in the Quran that says, قَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةً. The Jews say that the hand of God is restricted. In other words, God's a miser. The Jews don't say that. One Jew said that at the time of the prophet. And yet when Arabs now who have not studied Arabic rhetoric read that verse, they think all Jews say that. And this is a problem, that if you don't understand language, it's very dangerous to read what you think God is saying. Like the teacher who one of his students was reading a book, he said, "You're not ready for that book." He said, "I promise I'll only take from it what I understand." He said, "That's not what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of you taking what you think you understand." Because this is what happens so often in our traditions. So we have a real serious problem with the negative externalities of religion. And my argument is that religion now is in so many places causing so much harm. And the secularists, who really, many of them hate religion, are using these examples to say, you know what, we need to get rid of this thing. And so Sam Harris becomes a hero, despite the fact if you actually read his book, The End of Faith, he's calling for a preemptive nuclear strike on Muslims, that this might be necessary to save ourselves. I mean, this is the type of insanity that we've fallen into, because we have also fundamentalist secularists that are often as dangerous in their ideas and ideologies as so-called fundamentalist religious peoples. You know, we live in a very dangerous world because the tools that we now have far outstripped our ethical nature, the ability to use those tools for our benefit. And we can now see very clearly that we're capable of destroying massive numbers of people. We've got nuclear proliferation. We've got all of this technology that we don't even understand, really. It's higher magic. We don't understand. So we have real problems. And I think as religious people and committed religious people, we need to really think seriously about what went wrong. What went wrong? This is something that I grapple with every day, because when I read about these reports in Muslim countries about what's going on, and I recognize that a lot of these people actually believe that they're doing something in the name of God. And we all know how heinous things can be done when they're done in the name of God, right? It takes evil people to do evil, but good people, they need religion to do evil, right? I mean, that's what happens. So my feeling right now is the only way that we're going to get out of this incredible mess that we're in, religiously speaking, is we need the Judaism of Rabbi Hillel. It's not going to work otherwise. We can't have any other version. We need the Judaism that says, when the non-Jew asks, what is the Torah? I want to study the Torah. And he's told, what you don't want done to yourself, don't do to your neighbor. That's the whole Torah. Now go and study. That's it. If you don't get that, you don't get anything. And that is also true of our own tradition. We need the Islam of Imam al-Ghazali. We need the Islam of Fakhruddin al-Razi, who said all of Islam can be reduced to two statements. Both of these men, two of the greatest theologians in the history of our tradition, said all of Islam can be reduced to two statements: serving and loving the Creator, and serving and loving His creation. Serving and loving the Creator, and serving and loving His creation. We need the Christianity of St. Francis Assisi. I'm amazed at the Christians out here with all these hate signs towards Muslims, and I'm wondering, well, people haven't read their books, and when they read them, they often misunderstand them. But I'm just wondering about love your enemies, what that meant. I really wonder about that. And Kierkegaard said the problem with Christianity is the only Christian in all of Christendom was Jesus. So it is a problem. We have real problems. These religions they're like nuclear energy. They have massive power. They're a relatively clean energy if used with the right constraints and in the proper system. And they can illuminate houses. But they also have toxic side effects. And if we don't learn to deal with the toxic waste, how do we denude that toxic waste? There's actually scientists working on that right now with nuclear energy, trying to figure out how they can stop the toxicity of that waste. How do we neutralize, or at least mitigate, the toxic waste of our religions? How do we do that? That's a question, and I don't have the answer. But I know that those great men and women also of the tradition, Rabi al-Adawiyya, introduced love into Islamic piety. A woman in the 4th century introduced love into Islamic piety because everybody was obsessed with fear, and she said, I don't worship God out of fear of the fire. I worship God because I'm in love with God. And she really introduced that. So we have a lot of work. Mipnei Tikkun Olam. Olam is the Hebrew. I get a lot of Hebrew words because of the Arabic. Olam, we say alam. Alam in the Arabic language, which means world, is called in the Arabic grammatical system a noun of instrument. The form fa'al is the noun of instrument. It's the noun that you use to describe an instrument to do what the root of the word means. So alam in Arabic is the noun of instrument for knowledge. The world is the instrument of knowledge. And according to the Quran, what is to be known is our Lord. Thank you very much. And Dr. Rabbi Lerner, I consider him a courageous man. He takes a lot of heat, but I mean, that's really what religious people are supposed to be doing. It's the ones that are generating the heat that are all the problems. But the ones that are trying to cool down the flames are the ones that take the heat. And so, you know, I appreciate that. And I'll just, because a poem was recited earlier, a poem that I always, whenever I get things like this, is a poem that I'm reminded of, which is Robert Frost wrote a poem called The Fear of God. And he said, if you should rise from nowhere up to somewhere, from being nobody up to being somebody, be sure to keep repeating to yourself, you owe it to an arbitrary God, whose mercy to you rather than to others won't bear too critical examination. If for lack of license to wear the uniform of who you are, you should be tempted to make up for it in a subordinating look or tone, beware of coming too much to the surface and using for apparel what was meant to be the curtain of the inmost soul. Thank you.